Well, we're here with Rick Greenwood, who's the project review coordinator for the Rhode Island Historic Preservation Commission. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history here. Now, as you can see, Rick, we're right by one of the famous lime kilns, aren't we?
That's right. This is actually one of the later kilns. Behind us is one of the probably 18th century kilns. This would appear to be a 19th century one, and you can tell by the iron plate that's bolted around it that it was modified from the original pure stone construction to allow for a more efficient and higher burning temperature kiln in the late 19th century. And this is probably one of the kilns that was one of the last to be operated here. Operations burning lime lasted until the 1920s, nearly 250 years of operation on this site. Probably one of the oldest industrial operations in the Northeast.
That's pretty incredible. Now, how do these kilns work, and why did you burn lime? What was the point behind that?
Right. Lime is highly valued by masons, plasterers, and people such as that. In fact, you see behind us a fine example of why this lime was so good. It was a hard binding mortar that enabled stonemasonry to survive very well. When the English colonists arrived here, they were used to having good quality lime from back home in England, but at first could find none here. Massachusetts colony had absolutely no lime except what they got from burning oyster shells, a very time-consuming process, and not very good quality lime. So when the English colonists that came down to the Rhode Island area with Roger Williams encountered exposed ledges of natural lime, they were highly excited. And in fact, Williams wrote to the governor of Connecticut informing him that they had in fact finally found some good quality lime. And because it was prized and necessary for construction, masonry, it was soon being processed and distributed throughout New England and eventually around the world. What you have in the ground is a hard rock lime. Basically, it is a mineral. And what you need to do to create it into the lime that can be pulverized and used by masons to create a mortar is to drive off various chemical compounds. And you do that with extreme heat. So basically, you have a roasting process. The lime ore would be brought as well from the nearby quarries that we'll see in a minute. And then they would be loaded in alternating layers within the kiln, and the fire would be started. The fire would have to be kept going from 3 to 7 days, depending on the hardness of the lime. It had to be tended around the clock, and as the charcoal would burn down, it would have to be recharged from the base. And eventually, after, as I say, 3 to 7 days, he would judge by the whiteness of the lime that it had been roasted to the proper temperature, and then they would simply allow the fire to die down. They would pull out the core, which is a process we don't know whole lots about, but it probably is where a lot of the impurities would collect. So that would be pulled out, and then the lime gradually allowed to cool off, and then it would be put in casks. Once again, the local forests came into play there. Chestnut wood, the American chestnut, which was almost completely destroyed by the Great Blight in the early 20th century, was a very predominant wood species around here. And it was just what they wanted for the wooden casks that they would pack the lime in and ship it to market. The nature of the process was that you're driving off chemical compounds so that when you reintroduce water to the lime, it will make a new chemical reaction that will fuse it into a hard binding mortar. So it's very important that those casks could be made watertight and keep all moisture out so that the lime would be preserved.
It's a pretty fascinating story.
It's very fascinating. And what's so amazing about it is that there was a large amount of expertise, organization, and business sense that went into it. And it all began in the late 17th century, a time we think of people out here just being simple farmers worried more about their cows and their beans than foreign markets, transportation across what were then very long distances from here to Providence, let us say, or up to Mendon on the Great Road. And there were a tremendous interconnection of leases for wood, for digging lime, for burning in the kilns. It really gives us a better sense of how sophisticated the people in the 17th and 18th century were in terms of industry. We tend to think we invented those things, or in the late 19th century. That's not the case. And it also supported a wide range of other skills, such as the charcoal burners, the coopers, who would be busy working year-round to have these casks ready to go. And then there were also the teamsters. There were 4-horse teams that would haul the lime in the casks to wherever they may go, originally down the Great Road to Providence. One of the developers of the lime industry, David Harris, in the mid-18th century, had already purchased an interest in a wharf in Providence. So he was, in a sense, a merchant as well as a manufacturer. Later on, when the Blackstone Canal was built, sort of over the ridge and down in the river valley, it could get hauled by canal up to Worcester, where it was one of the major products that got shipped on the canal, or down to Providence, where, again, it could be shipped down to the West Indies, South America, or elsewhere in the United States.
Now, Rick, as far as your organization, Rhode Island Historic Preservation Commission, how do you go about preserving this type of environment and making sure that we still have this information years in the future?
Right. The Historical Preservation Commission has a dual mission, and the first of these is to basically to survey the state and find out where rare historical resources such as this are. And not surprisingly, lime rock was one of the first such resources that we surveyed after our commission was created in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And in our survey, we designated a historic district here, the Lime Rock Village, that includes the area where we're standing now, and had it entered on the National Register of Historic Places, which is the national listing of outstanding historical sites. By listing it on the National Register, we have provided it with a measure of protection from various public activities, such as the state highway, which runs right through the historic district. We and the Department of Transportation work very closely to ensure that improvements made to the highway do not adversely affect the important historical qualities here. Now, in addition to a regulatory or protective benefit from National Register listing, we're also able to provide a measure of support for the people who have the special honor and the special responsibility of living in historic districts. And most recently, one of the benefits we were able to give was to extend a loan from our revolving loan fund to the Lincoln Land Conservation Trust to acquire this property on which we're standing, which was in danger of being developed. And another responsibility, which I'm happy to be furthering today, is to educate people, to make them aware of just how special this is and how endangered it can be, such as to lose these kilns, which have been here from 200 to 100 years, would be a terrible loss, not just to lime rock, but to the people of Rhode Island and, in a larger sense, to the people of the country.